Good morning, dear students. Welcome to my very first class for grade 10 history. Today, I'll be starting with the lesson Nationalism in India, and I'll be dealing with the lesson very thoroughly. This lesson will be covered in different parts and subparts. And as we proceed, we'll get to know about the different developments, different set of events, which absolutely led to the national movement and then finally the independence of the country. Uh, as we discuss in every class, you will get a kind of idea about, the cause of the Indian national movement and, the kind of events that came up and the kind of repression and suppression, the kind of activities on part of the participants and the role of the leaders as well. So without any further delay, let's get started on this. Now, if I talk about the term nationalism, this is one word which is indeed very important and also has a great significance and also very commonly known because we have been hearing this word since your earlier grades as well. So, if I just talk about this word nationalism, I'll not say that this was just, this was just one day event or 2 years event. We have to understand that this was a gradual process. And this process absolutely, led to what is called the independence of the country. Now, this since I am using the word a process, that means it's a gradual process. It absolutely led to the independence of the country from the foreign rule, from the foreign domination. And this word becomes very important because this is something which united the people together. This actually created a spirit of oneness, a spirit of unity amongst the people of the country, and then that finally led to what is called the freedom and gave us independence. So, just to proceed further, just I have given you a kind of idea about the word itself. Now, I'll proceed further with the slide and we'll just pick up the slides one by one and try to understand the concepts and also establish connections between the different events and the different developments that came up during the course of the Indian national movement. Now, moving to the next slide, you can see I have put some pictures here. And of course, these are the pictures of the great leaders. You know the different leaders, you are aware of them. So I've just put in some pictures so that you know and you have a kind of idea about these important personalities. And you can just know more about them for your own understanding and knowledge. And you can also try to find out at least some important contribution made by them. Moving to the next slide now. Nationalism in India. First of all, we are aware of the very concept of a colony. We know that we were one colony of Great Britain. Great Britain had many, many colonies in different parts of the globe, and we were just one such colony of Great Britain. Now, because we are ruled by Great Britain for so many years, that means we were actually undergoing the process of colonialism. And then that is something which led to the rise and growth of nationalism, finally leading to what is called the independence of the country. So please be aware of these terms. Colony. We were one colony because we were ruled by a superpower. We were ruled by a popular power. Colonialism, because we were one colony of Great Britain, so we experienced colonialism. And then all that led to what is called anti-colonial movement with the spirit of nationalism. Anti means against, colonial means against the colonial power. So the people of the country united together and led the anti-colonial movement. Now, this is something important because we talk about anti-colonial movement and then we talk about the concept of unity. So both went hand in hand together, the united struggle and the struggle against the colonial power, or we can say united struggle towards the anti-colonial way of ruling us. So we say that anti-colonial movement. We are aware of Gandhiji, we know Mahatma Gandhi. Absolutely one important leader and a very important leader of our own country. And majority of the contribution made by him towards the attainment of the freedom of the country. He tried his best to actually unite the people together on a common front for one common movement and one common cause. So the common movement was a united movement, an absolutely anti-colonial movement, and the common cause was to gain independence and freedom. So we cannot forget the contribution of Mahatma Gandhi in this context. Whenever we talk about the very concept of unity, we have to understand also that yes, in a country like ours, which was full of diversity, unity also faced some kind of, what you can say, some kind of opposition. When people were united together, of course, that was not a smooth ride. Of course, that was not a smooth process that everybody was united, and it was just something very, very simple for the leaders to approach the people, and the people got together, and then the struggle started against the colonial power. No, it was not that simple, because with unity we talk about conflict. The moment we talk about unity, we talk about, yes, a country like ours which was absolutely full of diversity. So unity faced the problem of and the issue of what is called conflict, because we are talking about a country like India and a country like Bharat and a country which is full of diversity. That is our own country. So in this particular slide, we talked about the concept of colony, we talked about the concept of colonialism, we also talked about what is anti-colonial movement, Mahatma Gandhi, and then unity comes with conflict. I hope this slide is clear to you. I'll proceed to the next slide now. First World War. How many of you are aware of First World War? If you're not aware, you should know the reason behind the First World War. And you should know how are we involved in the First World War. So, if you see this slide, you can see there are different images. The word epidemic. Then you can see many people are eating from the same plate. This is also the concept of sharing, but then that also reflects what is called food crisis and then the drought conditions. So what are these? These are the problems. These are the issues. This is all reflecting that yes, crisis was building up, crisis was setting in. So now we proceed to the next part of the lesson, that is the First World War, Khilafat and non-cooperation movement. So we'll pick it up from here. The First World War, if you talk about. So I give you one homework, you try to find out the time period for the First World War and the basic reason behind the First World War as history learners. I'm sure you'll be able to do that. Okay. The First World War created a kind of economic and political situation, in a country which was full of crisis. For example, of course, we were one important colony of Great Britain, important because we were supplying all the raw materials and the other stuffs. Also, Great Britain was involved in the First World War directly. So, in a way, we were indirectly one party to the First World War. Now, Great Britain or the colonial government, if I talk about, was ruling us. And the idea was to finance the war at the same point of time. So with the First World War setting in, definitely, there was a kind of increase in the defense expenses. There was a kind of increase in the income tax. Then the prices of the custom duties also doubled. So if you talk about increase in the defense expenditure, if you talk about increase in the income tax and the prices of the custom duties being doubled, that means it's a kind of burden on the common man. The very concept of forced recruitment was started. Forced recruitment. Recruitment means I'm talking about, yes, people were asked to join the army. Okay. Forceful recruitment. That means forcefully people were asked to join the army. Because the idea was to supply with the men resources. And especially people were picked up from the villages by the colonial government to supply for the soldiers in the army. Then 1918, 1919, all these set of problems were again, serving as a kind of crisis for the entire country, for the common man, for the common people. But then what added more to the crisis was the crop failure of 1918, 1919. And the moment we talk about crop failure, we have to talk about food shortage. And this was actually, further aggravated by influenza epidemic. So if you just visualize and try to reflect the previous slide which I showed you, influenza epidemic, food crisis, drought conditions, crop failure, so all these culminated into a huge crisis, a very, very huge crisis setting in. There was increase in the war loan. And if you talk about 1921 census, 12 to 13 million people died as a result of this. So all this was leading to what? All this was leading to a kind of political dissatisfaction, in the minds and the hearts of the people against the colonial government. So you see a kind of economic crisis building up, and this economic crisis is actually leading to political dissatisfaction amongst the people towards the colonial government. So let's again review this slide once again. So we talk about First World War. We talk about new economic situation. What kind of new economic situation? New economic situation in context of the economic crisis. What kind of economic crisis? Increase in the defense expenses, increase in income tax, doubling of the custom duties, prices of the custom duties. There was a crop failure, there was forceful recruitment, then there was influenza epidemic, then there was loss of lives, increase in the war loans, and then all this finally culminated into what is called political dissatisfaction. That means people were aware and had become aware that this is not the government for the people of the country. I hope this slide is equally clear to you. We'll now proceed to the next slide. So I have given this image here of Mahatma Gandhi ji, and you can just know some information about him on your own. His year of birth, death, when did he come back to India, where was he before he returned to India, and professionally he was known for what profession. So this is one important image which I have picked up, and here I have tried to put in a kind of image with the code word of satyagraha and the code word of truth. Satyagraha and truth. You can see these images also in this slide. Gandhiji is accompanied by lot many followers. You have some important leaders also. So these are the different images. He's accompanied by some followers, leaders, common man. Can you just think on this? Maybe he's trying to lead a movement. Maybe the followers have accepted. Yes, of course, they have. All right. So Gandhiji is known for satyagraha. And satyagraha is the path of truth. So I just ask you to know more about it, to find out more about it on your own, so you develop a better understanding of it. So he believed in the concept of satyagraha, and he led 3 important satyagrahas when he came to India. Champaran Satyagraha, Kheda Satyagraha, and Ahmedabad Satyagraha. So these are the 3 important satyagraha movement or the satyagraha andolan that Gandhiji had led. Champaran in present-day Bihar, Ahmedabad in Gujarat, Kheda in Gujarat. So you should know the places, and you should know that Champaran Satyagraha was his first satyagraha. Let us proceed to the next slide now. All right. So he returned to India in January 1915. So I just asked you to find out when did he come back, and you get an answer for that. So before coming to India, we are aware that yes, he was in South Africa, and he was also leading a movement of satyagraha there, and that had actually yielded some good results. So if we talk about the very concept of satyagraha and the idea of satyagraha which he stressed upon, he basically stressed upon the power of truth and the need to search for truth. He stressed on the use of non-violent methods. He's a man for non-violence. He's a man known for non-violence. He's a man known for ahimsa. Dear students, please know him for all these values and ideals. He believed that yes, the oppressed can be convinced to use this method. Somebody who is oppressed, somebody who is exploited can be convinced to use this method because this is based on satyagraha, this is based on non-violence. He was of the opinion that ultimately, if the oppressed one is following the path of satyagraha and non-violence, it will lead to victory. It will give him the victory. He is of the opinion that dharma of non-violence will definitely unite the Indians. So he's believing in all these important values and he's applying these values, through the course of the national movement. And he's believing that the dharma of non-violence will lead to the unity of the Indians. He's saying that yes, if the oppressed one is using the path of satyagraha, it will lead to victory. So in 1916, Gandhiji, he traveled Champaran in Bihar. So I just told you earlier also that Champaran is in Bihar. And, some peasants, they came to him and they appealed to him about, the indigo cultivation. And so basically he is leading the cause of the peasantry class from Champaran against the oppressive plantation system, which was the indigo plantation system, because these peasants, they never wanted to grow indigo, and the colonial government was pressurizing the peasantry from Champaran to grow indigo. Indigo was used for dyeing the cloth in uniform of the soldiers, basically. Now you must be wondering why these peasants were not ready to grow indigo, because they wanted to grow the food crops, which was to give them a better return. Food crops were in demand, indigo was not in demand, but the colonial government wanted these peasantry to grow indigo because the idea was again to use this crop as a dyeing agent for the uniform of the soldiers. And you know the connection between Great Britain and the First World War. So please remember that Champaran is for the indigo cultivators, Champaran is for the peasantry against the cultivation of indigo. The second important satyagraha is the Kheda satyagraha of Gujarat. So if you talk about the Kheda satyagraha, the government refused to remit the land revenue and insisted on its full collection. So there was a crop failure and epidemic, and the peasants were in no position to pay the revenue. So if you talk about the Kheda satyagraha, the peasantry class was in no position to pay the revenue. Reason being, there was a crop failure, there was a kind of epidemic. But the government did not say that yes, the peasantry class was free not to pay the revenue. In fact, the government said that yes, the peasants will be paying the revenue. And the peasants will be paying the revenue in the huge lump sum amount. So there was no relief for the peasantry class. There was no relief for the peasants even in times of crop failure and epidemic. So these peasants, they again approached Gandhiji for a kind of support, for a kind of help. And if you talk about the last satyagraha, which is the Ahmedabad satyagraha. Ahmedabad satyagraha basically arose because of a kind of dispute between the workers and the mill owners. And these workers, they demanded a hike in the wage, a kind of 35% hike in the wage. And the mill owners were never ready to abide by this demand. So this was the reason as to why the Ahmedabad satyagraha was led by Gandhiji. So dear students, please remember the Champaran satyagraha, the Kheda satyagraha and the Ahmedabad satyagraha. Champaran is 1916. Plantation workers, indigo cultivation. Kheda is 1917. Again, crop failure and epidemic. Peasants were not ready and they were in no position to pay the revenue in full amount to the colonial government. And Ahmedabad is 1918. Mill workers versus the mill owners. They demanded a kind of hike in the wages by around 35%. Can you just recognize these important faces, these important personalities? If you can, it is absolutely wonderful. If you cannot, please try to find out about them. Why I am showing you these images? Because their activities and their contribution also is very important for the next set of development which comes up, and that is the Rowlatt Act. So I'll stop here and we'll proceed in the next class, and we'll start from the Rowlatt Act. So the Rowlatt Act also did not just, suddenly uh, came up in isolation, or it was something which was not just implemented by the colonial government out of nowhere. So definitely the activities on part of the revolutionaries was the set of reason as to why the Rowlatt Act was introduced by the colonial government. So I'm just stopping here right now, and I give you this homework to find out about the revolutionaries, and the pictures which you have seen, you can just know more about them and try to find more information on them, and then we proceed our discussion with the Rowlatt Act in the next class.